Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast to all the film faithful. And today we have an old friend back on the show. Brady Jacquin is going to talk about his movie Crawlspace, which is a horror short film, but horror not in the same sense as we understand it. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how we're doing in the comments below. Yes, I normally have my webcam on, but a few things have happened over the past 24 hours. So if I were to show it to you, this would turn into a horror show, not crawl space. But today we've got Brady on. We're going to talk about his movie. Your moviness. How are you doing on this fine Saturday afternoon after Black Friday and Thanksgiving?
Yeah, it's super nice. I don't know about everyone else or where everyone else is located right now, right? Oh, Luke, I know where you are. Not to be really weird with that.
Don't dox me.
Don't dox
but
me.
was pretty brutal waking up and it's like 25 something degrees outside down here in the Carolinas. So
Yeah.
definitely feels like winter came really quick for us. So I'm looking forward to, not much of a heat up, but at least a little heat up so we could get outside and do stuff before we start hibernating for the winter.
We're talking about the weather, guys. That's what we're doing right now. Is that how we're getting acquainted with each other?
It is brutal out there. It is brutal out there. So
No, it is.
but yeah, so Brady, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate
I
it.
definitely appreciate it. Right, we got an opportunity to watch and kind of go through the Thoughts Return, which was super enjoyable. Right, I really liked it. Watched it a handful of times, and I made sure for Crawl Space, wanted to kind of give it the same amount of just watches, just to make sure I absorbed everything, because I think as far as like storytelling goes, you do such a good job of helping like convey a lot of stuff without there necessarily need to be a ton of dialogue. I feel like that's a struggle with movies nowadays, is everything kind of gets like force fed down your mouth. And I like how really even the start of this film, right? A lot of it's non-dialogue at the very beginning, right? So like we see this argument happening, we don't hear anything about the argument. Now, I thought that was a really interesting thing to do, and I'm going to put a pin in that comment, right? Because I want to talk about that at the very end. So I just want to throw that out there, right? I
Sure.
noticed it was a very bold choice not to have kind of that opening dialogue, because I think you see this kind of blow up with the argument. You would think that would be kind of the best way to kind of get us involved in it. But instead, you do something a little bit different, which I also really enjoyed, which was you really had this really tremendous score that happens, right? It just kind of the sound, just kind of everything that was going on. It felt very like you feel it getting tense just from the music. And that's something I feel like we don't see as good a job, right? Not to be that old guy that's like, oh, movies back then, they always had a better soundtrack, they had better scores, they knew what they were doing. But I feel like that's maybe a little bit more of a lost art now. So I was curious for you, Brady, how do you go about picking some of these like scores, the soundtrack, and maybe for like aspiring new directors, where's maybe a good place they can go to kind of get that strong kind of music score that you would have?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to depend on your project, because I make music as well, so I'm able to kind of compose certain things. For this movie,
Awesome.
for this movie I did some of that, and then other things I took songs that already existed, and I either kind of modified them or took a small section of them and played that and did things to it or whatever. But because any director or any person who's tried to like find stock music for something will know that it's really hard. Like, to find it's so much better to be able to create something that's catered to the scene that's already been, um, shot and edited and constructed in the director's mind, because then you know exactly the feeling you're going for, versus like scrolling through artlist.io and just being like, okay, this one, the beginning's good, but then all of a sudden it gets way too dramatic, or vice versa. It's hard to tell. So I wouldn't say that you abandon stock music and stuff, because you can find some really good stuff there for sure, and I have. Um, but it's always been like really hard and taken forever. Like, you might have to scroll through for a really long time, and you might have to Frankenstein it, where you grab the beginning of this song and like a middle of a different song, and you kind of only use them for those parts because the whole song doesn't work for you. But honestly, the best way is always going to be to either compose the music yourself if you're able to, or work with a composer who you can talk to and talk about the emotion of the scene with. I didn't end up being able to do that for Crawlspace, but that is the best way. I've been able to do it before. I've been lucky enough to work with some really talented composers, and it's amazing to give them a feeling, and then they bring you something back that just captures it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because yeah, I do feel like it generally it's a little bit of a lost art, where I feel like we're losing a little bit of it. So like I said, just kind of the ambiance that we get from that was just very chilling. And I really like that because we kind of get the visuals of what's happening, right? We have our two main leads, Adam and Julia, right? Where Adam obviously is 95% of it,
Right.
and does such a, like I said, just a tremendous job of being able to kind of take everything that's happening. And we, without hearing the argument, right, we could see what the argument's about, right? So we see, a laptop open, see some scantily clad people, or there's people that are there on the screen. So trying to, I'm going to try my best to dance around that as much as possible.
I'm not. I'm not at all.
But that's kind of what we see, right? And once again, right, we understand what the argument is about without having to hear anyone kind of going about it. So we kind of transition, and I like how you have this after that kind of opening scene, right? We have the transition from the crawl space, right, where we have you panning up the camera, and then it kind of goes through the floor up into the main part of the room, right?
Yeah.
And I love that shot. That was so cool to see. I was just curious, was there any like specific inspiration for you wanting to kind of do that camera move where you start off with the crawl space, and then you go up into the house at the top?
Yeah. That was, so this is based on a feature screenplay that I've written for a full feature movie. And that was always the plan to start, because I just wanted to, like, again, without saying anything, establish the one geographical relationship. Like, it's the crawl space, it's directly beneath where he is when he's in the house at all times. And also just give that feeling that there is a relationship between those two things. Like, hey, why did we start? Just the fact that you start the movie on that shot at least tells the audience, hey, there is something relationally connecting these two things. It tells them this crawl space area and this area that we're going through, the act of moving. If I had just cut, it might have been different. It might not have communicated that, hey, I want you to know that these two things are right next to each other when I come up with the camera. You know what I mean? So it's all about just kind of trying to get as much information to the audience as possible without having to say anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like I said, I love that shot. I thought it was just such a cool thing, just to
Thanks,
kind of
man.
see it kind of go through that.
I appreciate it.
I thought it was so cool. Because obviously, you're probably not going to have, a giant hole in your floor to create that shot. There's a lot of creative things that you could do to
Right.
give it the same effect.
Yeah. I wish it'd be cool. I would have loved to have. The best way to do it is to do that way. Like, yeah, actually cut a hole in the floor and just do it for real. But yeah, I'm not made of money, so I didn't feel like
I could imagine not. So
yeah, it's my house. Like, I don't want to.
yeah, I was about to say, because I happen to notice, right? I noticed the same front door at the beginning as Slots
Right.
Returned. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I think I'm on to where the setting is.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
positioned,
shift
so.
it at some point here, or just like, I don't know, just keep switching it to where I shoot it differently enough that it's not distracting. But like,
Yep.
yeah,
Well,
it's just my house, guys.
I honestly had to watch it a few times because I think in the Thoughts Return, like it looked like the doors were closed for most of it, so I didn't really realize that it like opened up. So I think that you did some things. I don't know if you were thinking about that at the time, but
Yeah.
there was definitely times where I wasn't 100% sure. The main thing that gave it away was the door, right?
Sure. Yeah,
it's
very
the door with-
recognizable glass window
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah,
for sure.
it's a very recognizable. That's what stuck out to me. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so we kind of get to learn more of this, and we see, sometimes the laughs, right? We see Adam. He's obviously gone through a lot, right? By the amount of facial hair that he had. I guess it's a good thing Adam is good with growing facial hair out, because there's times where he's clean shaven, sometimes he's not.
Yeah.
So clearly good to see that he's able to put that together, because I'm sure maybe some people would have to do some makeup, but I think that might take you a little bit out of it. So
Yeah, fake
uh,
beards don't look good.
yes, yes. So um and we see Adam is he's kind of sitting down in this chair, and he's once again watching this nice lady not having a whole lot of garments on.
And we just can't say the word, can we, huh? We just it's like uh he who must not be named, but you know, it's porn.
This is very true. It's very true. Yeah. So he's watching some porn, right? What I thought was really interesting, and Luca, I'm going to pass this question over to you, because I'm curious about your take on this, because you, I think, are really good with kind of discerning some of the deeper meanings that I missed. What I thought was really interesting was when we see him watching this, right? We see like the laptop, the screen is cracked. I also noticed that the phone that he answers the call for, which we'll get to, from Dan the man from the church, so
Dan
it's
the
also
man.
cracked.
That should have been the contact on his phone.
But it was really interesting, because I kind of had a little bit of headcanon here, right? So the way I looked at this was, he's sitting here, he's, kind of watching the porn that, clearly ruined his relationship with Julia, and he's watching it on a cracked screen. And I thought it was really interesting, because it kind of made me think like, oh, he's sitting here watching the porn on these broken devices, and it's what kind of led to his broken relationship. So I thought that was a very interesting way of doing it. And it kind of reminded me of that scene in Train Spotting, where, we had where he's digging through the toilet, looking for his fix. And I thought I kind of looked at the same thing with Adam, that he didn't care if like the screen is all broken and he can't really make a good vision out of what's happening. It didn't matter to him, as long as it was given the gratification that he needed, he was okay with it. So I thought that was, like I said, I don't know if it was intended or not. I'll let you answer that, Brady. But Luca, I was curious on your take about kind of the broken screens, and if you saw anything deeper behind that.
Well, I mean, Brady and I had a very interesting theological discussion before we started recording, but I do want to lead off with a quote from Aristotle, where he says that man occupies the space between gods and beasts, and when you sort of degrade yourself, or when you allow yourself to be overtaken by addiction of any kind, whether it's porn or alcohol or whatever, you sort of degrade yourself to the level of beasts, and what it does is it causes a break in your soul. It shows just how broken you are as a person by allowing these things to control you, as opposed to you controlling your urges. So obviously the cracks are a manifestation of what is going on internally, to where even if he no longer cares about the state of his devices, it kind of reflects the state of mind that he's in, that where he doesn't care about what is going on in his life. Now, props to him for keeping a very clean house, but still, it just shows to the level that he's sunk to where he looks disheveled. He looks like someone who hasn't bathed or washed or shaved in days or even weeks. And the fact of the matter is that when you've degraded yourself so low, you've debased yourself to that point, nothing seems to matter anymore. You just let these things take control of you, and it sort of reminds me of Dante's Inferno, where where the poet tries to climb a mountain to try to get to the sun, but he's blocked by the she wolf, the leopard, and I forget it. I think it's she-wolf, leopard, probably the lion. And he runs into Virgil, and Virgil tells him the only way to go up is to go down, i.e., to go into the bowels of hell. So what we see later on, where he descends into the crawl space, is pretty much, and Brady, I'm not sure if this is something you did consciously or subconsciously. It's very much a retelling of Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy, where in order for him to sort of get the closure and cleanse himself of that broken state and sort of exorcise the demon of addiction, he has to go to the basso loco, the dark place, the low place, in order to sort of rediscover himself and then realize that, these things don't control me, I control them. And, and that's how he's able to sort of repair what has been broken, i.e. the relationship, and kind of move forward and kind of put that behind him.
Mm. Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's great, man. That's a great kind of interpretation of that. I think I it's funny how when you like you keep saying like, I don't know if you meant this consciously or subconsciously, and I think that's really interesting because I think when you try to tell this kind of story and you do, like we did, build in a lot of those kind of things that you're talking about. A lot of those things we're thinking consciously about that. We're putting it in little ways in the script, like the cracks on the screen and all those kinds of things. They were intentional. But then when you do that, you also get a bunch of other stuff that you didn't mean, because it's almost now it's like built into everything you do, even when you're not thinking about it. Like, I love what you said, Lee, about the cracks on, like, we intended the cracks on the screen. We wanted it to look like that. We wanted it to have this kind of feel, um, for all these kind of different reasons that you were talking about. But one that you talked about that I didn't even think of was that, like, the cracks on the screen would make it harder for him to even be able to see what's going on the screen and in the videos, and it kind of obscures his vision, but he doesn't really care because he just still needs to get that. I didn't even think of that. Like, we didn't even think of that element to it, which I think is really interesting. I like that these things kind of have a life of their own. They kind of do things
Mhm.
that I didn't even, maybe I intended half of it, but the other half is just like it grew into its own thing that I couldn't have, controlled at all. That's just the art being the art, and I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, I think that's so cool. Did you happen to have like just broken like laptops or something? Or I'm sure you
So
don't sit there just look at the hammer destroying equipment. So
yeah, I thought about it for a second. I was like, I do have a crappy, kind of old, crummy laptop that I could maybe just crack the screen and say whatever. But luckily, and maybe I love these kinds of synchronicities that God puts in to our lives, where the actor who played that had a cracked laptop. His laptop was cracked. And I just said,
perfect.
cool, bring yours. That's awesome. And then while we were shooting, because we shot a lot of the crawl space stuff before we shot a lot of that upstairs stuff. I was like squatting down getting a shot, and my phone just slid out of my pocket and fell
Ugh.
maybe half a foot, not even a long way, onto the ground face down, and it cracked the whole screen somehow. You know how that works? Like, you drop your phone from a top
Yeah.
of a 2-story house and it's fine, but then you like hit it with a nickel and it all breaks. That's what happened. And I was like, oh, my phone cracked. All right, JD, this is your character's phone now. So we'll use this for the scene tomorrow. And that's what we did. So that kind of, like, we wanted to crack screens, but we weren't going to be able to get a phone that was cracked. And then it did. I cracked my phone. So we just did it. Like, in the script, it's that way. But that was literally just, I mean, call it luck, call it God, whatever. Like, that is what happened. I didn't have any control of cracking my phone.
No, I feel you. Yeah, it is really interesting that obviously that was the intention you had behind it was there. It just the resources ended up kind of presenting
Yeah.
itself in a way you were not expecting at all. So
Yeah, man. That seems to be how
um
it always happens.
yes, but I would say obviously going into it, it made a ton of difference, right? Seeing it kind of just, I think, just kind of shows how deep the addiction it's gotten at that stage,
Yeah.
for me personally. So, but yeah, so we see, Adam really kind of, clearly seems to be struggling with a lot of stuff, right? And the addiction, with the fact that it's cost him his relationship, is clearly hitting him hard. And we get a little bit of a lifeline here, from Dan. Dan clearly is, I don't think he says specifically, but is with the church, right? So, I kind of consider him, he's a religious figure, right? And just judging kind of from the conversation that we had right before this, I think that just furthered my idea that there's definitely kind of I would say, a religious aspect to this, right? So I was curious, and I know you and Luca were talking about a lot. So Luca, I'll pass it over to you really quick. But I'm curious, like, how do you feel like the role of religion works with this context where Dan is
Yeah.
there trying to help give Adam a lifeline, right? To try to help pull him out of this. So, Luca, I'll let you start, and then Brady, I'll definitely pass it over to you because I think you guys have a very good way of helping discuss this.
I mean, the thing is that we definitely need some sort of guidance or some sort of spiritual adherence in order to kind of guide our lives. And when we allow addiction to kind of get in the way of things, we kind of lose all perspective. It's what it is. It's kind of the proverbial devil and angel on your shoulders, really, because on the one hand, Dan is they're trying to guide Adam back to the place that he was before the fall, and yet you've got the correct devices where regardless of how terrible of a state they are, he's still going to go back to it. What I find really, really interesting is that because I wasn't sure if Dan was just a guy or if he was like a spiritual figure who was trying to sort of guide Adam back to normalcy. I mean, did you intentionally make it ambiguous or what?
Yeah. So I will say there's a much more fleshed out role for him in the feature version. So he is one of those characters that, because it's a short film version of a much longer story, he has a lot of other stuff that is to do with his character and how he interacts with Adam in the actual feature length movie, or the script, I should say. So there is that. But yeah, in this version, I thought, hey, it's enough that we don't know really anything about him, because the conversation just needs to feel like a guy reaching out to someone that he knows is not okay, kind of skirting around that, trying not to make it sound like he's just checking up on him, which is exactly what he's doing. But trying to throw him a lifeline, because I just wanted a scene where someone excuse me, where someone tried to throw him a lifeline and he just doesn't grab it. He's just not interested at that time. He's just not in a position where he can take that lifeline. And so whether I'm so happy you felt that way, because whether or not I intended that, which I'll say, like, to some degree, yes, with a story like this, I feel like I'm going to just political all your answers and dodge whether I actually intended things or not, because it might ruin it if I say that, yes, that is it, or no, that's not it. There's definitely an element of that in there, and I love that, because, like, whether it is or isn't, in that moment, that's what it feels like. So what does it matter, Like, you're totally right. It kind of feels like it could be the spiritual guide, or it could just be a friend reaching out who happens to be involved. We also have no idea how he's involved in the church per se. A lot of that gets fleshed out in the future version. But yeah, I hope that it was vague, but enough that it just communicated how that character felt, how Adam felt on the phone with him in that moment, hopefully.
Yeah, no, and I definitely think it did it for me, because when I heard the conversation, right, like you said, I think regardless of how strong his religious affiliation or whatever that kind of background is, it was ultimately a friend reaching out to another friend that's in a really dark place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that in that little bit that we got with Dan, I think there was plenty of ambiguity there as far as ultimately what role he'll play, and I'll be very curious for the Future Life one, where that kind of goes, because I think we just got just enough of Dan to be interested in what role he's going to have. So I'll be very curious to see what else kind of happens there.
Yeah. Thanks.
But yeah, so this is where, after the conversation he has with Dan, this is where we start to hear some noises coming out of the title of the film, which is Crawlspace, right? And Luca, what does this remind you of? These like weird noises you're hearing?
Wreck? I don't know.
I was going for the tall tale harp, but yeah, we know what to talk about. So, but yeah, so we hear kind of the noises in the crawl space, and what's interesting is you set up this trap, and Brady, I was trying my best to see, right, this trap that he sets up, I couldn't quite make out what he was using as bait. Was there something there? Because I think the bait definitely comes up later, right? But I was curious, the bait that he leaves for whatever he feels like is down there, right?
Yeah.
What exactly was it? And I guess I'd be curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, it was what it actually was just a bit of like grape jelly or whatever we had. I think it was just some grape jelly that he put on there. I have those traps because funny enough, the first week of moving in when I bought this house was finding out that I had possums all inside
Mm.
my air ducts. So
Oh my gosh.
I woke up one Sunday morning and I hear that familiar scratching that's kind of like what's in the movie. Um, and I'm like, what is that? And when I go over to the vent, I pull the vent off, and there's a little possum right there growling at me, and
Oh my
I punched it, and it scurried back down. I was frightened. I didn't expect it was Sunday morning. I didn't think I was gonna get a possum in my AC vent, but and I realized, and we bought those cages, and we caught 13 possums
Oh
that
my
were all
god.
in my air ducts. Yeah, they were just some mom must have had them and got them in there because my air ducts were broken and I fixed them. But yeah, we caught 13 that my wife took to some sanctuary. She saved them all from me, and that's I think you were asking about. I just lost the
No, I was
point
curious if
point of that.
it was like kind of a trap for an animal, if there was
Oh
something
yes, yeah,
you wanted to
yeah.
convey with what the actual
Yeah,
I guess
the bait
the lure
itself,
was. Trap.
the bait itself, I kind of wanted it to at first it was just kind of whatever, right? Whatever you and that's how those traps work. If you think there's an
Yeah.
animal in your crawl space or something, you can kind of put, they like certain things more than other things. I've heard of people putting Cheetos and stuff on there and they love it. So if you're trying to so I just wanted it to look like he thought maybe it could have been whatever, maybe just an animal or something. So he puts a trap down there with just some regular bait, which we used just grape jelly. And that way later when there's this other substance that's on there,
Hmm.
it's not the same substance. And
Yeah.
then you have to wonder like, how did that get there? And it hopefully poses, some more of those questions.
Oh, don't worry, Brady. We will definitely get into that because that'll be the nice meat of the argument. So, but that's good. I thought I couldn't tell, and like I said, most of it was obscured. And I'm good to hear that it wasn't necessarily super critical because I wasn't picking up on it. So that kind of I'll pat myself a little
Yeah.
bit on the back for not feeling like I'm totally missing
Yeah.
something that you're throwing at us. So
Yeah, I didn't put too much thought into the grape jelly. I was
okay.
just like, it just needs to be it just needs to be a thing. I'll be humble and acknowledge that. I'm not going to try to come up with some
Oh no.
theological reason why it was grape jelly instead of
No,
strawberry. But
that's perfectly good. And to me, that is the better way to do it, right? Because
right,
we haven't quite gotten to the stage where we want to go into the deep dive yet. So if you start
yeah,
throwing it out now, might make it a little bit too much of a
sure,
left turn. If he just starts putting, pounds of flesh down there, and
right,
stuff like that. So,
yeah.
but
By the way,
yeah. So
guys, this is a jujitsu dummy. If you're wondering, I'm realizing how creepy my camera angle must look because I've just got this dude
I
squatting
was
on a fridge back there. It's a jujitsu dummy, so
I was
just for
wondering why
anyone
you had this
watching.
like weird doll setup back there, and I was just
Yep.
like, you know what? I'm not
I've
here to
done
question
job
anything
interviews,
for
man.
you.
I have job interviews that I do, and I had them text me after it, and they literally were like, "Hey, what's up with the dude behind you? Like, what's going on with that thing?" And I was like, "Oh, I just left it there like a freak. Jujitsu. That's all it is. I'm not a weirdo, or I am, but just not in that sense."
No problem. I was gonna make a joke at the beginning, but we got so much other stuff that we were talking about, I totally forgot. So
Yeah, get him with
uh,
distraction.
did a pretty good job. So, but yeah, so we have Adam. He helps set up this trap. We see him return back to the house, and I like once again, you have the porn going on the computer, right? And I think kind of helps us understand that the addiction's kind of running wild, right? Like he doesn't even remember having something playing because I think the last time we saw, he actually closed the laptop. The last time we saw it,
Yeah,
now it was sitting on the countertop there playing. So I think it kind of shows him losing to that addiction. And this is where I think we kind of have that shift in how we're going to tell the story, right? Because this is where Adam looks outside and he sees, I'm going to say himself, right? It's a little bit obscure, but I think you can make out enough that that's him out there. And I think this is where, Adam goes out to investigate. He doesn't quite see anything, but we see the crawl space door open up, right? And Adam kind of takes a moment here to get in contact with Julia just to leave her a message. And I thought it was a nice touch that he doesn't talk directly with Julia. What he does is he leaves a message. And I think, like I said, I'll talk more about it at the end, but I'm going to put another pin in that, right? So we got one from the beginning, one for now, right? We're really saving up for this kind of communication or lack thereof with Julia, because I think it does play a very critical role in kind of the climax of what we get into.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have Adam going into the crawl space. And to me, and I give Adam full props here, that trap was not at the front where he left it. To me, that was my sign. I would have burned the house down. Like, that was a big trap, right? Like, there ain't no way that house is being burned down. I ain't dealing with that shit.
That's it.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I don't know what's down here, but it won, right? I'm not going to deal with this. I don't want to know, because, like I said, that was a big damn trap, and like there ain't nothing that should be talking that away. So
yeah, list that house, list it, sell it, make a profit, get out of there.
Yeah, gotta do what you can for that. So, but yeah, so we see, he has a flashlight, he shines it over, and we see the other version of him. We'll just use that type of reference, right? We see the other version of him, and he's munching down on the jelly, right? Now that we know what was in there. So munching down on some jelly, right? But obviously, yeah. So
that's kind of the thing.
At this time, right, I think it's a little bit more direct, right? So it looks like, he's kind of eating of some flesh, right? And I think the way I kind of looked at it, or the way that I kind of started to interpret this, right, is maybe not as I would say, like, obvious that, like, he's got this porn addiction, but like it's kind of this addiction to the flesh. And I think that's kind of ultimately what we're going for. So Luca, I'll pass it over to you, right? We see this other version of Adam, right? And he's chowing down on something. So how did you interpret that, or what do you think was going on there?
I would see it as a perversion of the Eucharist, really, because, well, at least for Lee and myself, I mean, we both grew up Catholic, so we both understand the idea of the Eucharist being us consuming the body and blood of Christ. Whereas here, what I guess I'll call him, Crawlspace Adam is doing is rather than munching on the Eucharist in the traditional sense, he's having a sort of perverted form of it, where instead of turning outward for salvation, he's sort of turning inward for perversion. So he's sort of eating himself in I guess you could say in a metaphorical sense. And as disgusting as it is, it's also quite remarkable too, because you just can't turn away from it. And the fact that Adam, is watching this happen before him, it's this confrontation of him having to see what is the most reviled thing that anybody could do, is to consume human flesh, right? So to see himself consuming that right before his very eyes is that sort of wake-up call that he needs to realize maybe there isn't something right going on with me. Maybe there's something that I need to address. That's the way I saw it.
Oh man, that's a lot darker than I was going for. Brady, you're gonna have to. I feel like me and Luke are looking at this two very different ways. So I don't know if you can maybe clear up a little bit about what you're thinking, or maybe just the ambiguity is just exactly what you're looking for. But
I was gonna say, no, I'm not. I love just.
No, that's okay. No, that's
so
perfectly
good.
fine.
Like, I'll just let you guys, like, I love hearing those things, because that's so good. Like, because obviously I know what I built into certain things and what we all kind of were trying to accomplish. So I'm not going to not answer like your questions per se, but
no, you're good.
I love those interpretations. That's so interesting, and so like fits, I think, with what we were trying to do.
No, that's awesome. No, I appreciate that, because I like how and like I said, this was me and Luca's first time, chatting about it as a group.
Yeah.
So it is very interesting, Luca, to kind of get your take on it, because I think we looked at it and came up with two I think we're both going the right direction, but I think one of us veered a little bit more on the darker side
I love
than
it.
the other. So
Yeah, I love it. I love both.
so
I mean, I'm not always this dark, just so you know.
no, that's okay, man. That is okay. So I mean, we're dealing with a very dark subject, right? Like, I mean, it is there for a reason. So, you know, so we see Adam is using his flashlight, right? And then, you know, the old flashlight starts to fail on him. So we'll be sure to start a GoFundMe for Adam. We're gonna get you plenty of flashlights this time, buddy.
Yeah, those classic convenient horror movie flashlights that always turn off at the worst moment.
Yep. So, but we'll make sure we give him like a dozen flashlights. So when he has to encounter himself again and, you know, go against his own demons, he'll be better prepared.
Right.
And I like how, you know, the lights go out. We're in this crawl space. And, you know, we kind of see where the camera's facing Adam and we see kind of this dark thing go behind him. And it didn't really move very human-like. So I was actually curious, Brady, for you, how did you create that like scene, right? Because I was thinking like maybe it's like a person with a cloak, because it's really dark, and I don't think it's just dark for the scene. I feel like there's something going on there. So would you mind, could you share a little bit about the Brady magic and how you kind of created that weird kind of mysterious creature moving in the background?
Yeah. So that was obviously JD is one person. So anytime that there's two of him on screen, there's some trickery that's going on there. So that was actually my AD, Reed Vroman, who I just was like, hey man, you guys have similar builds. I need you to go back there. I need you to take off most of your clothes. And I need you to just kind of crawl. And we played with how he moved. Like I wanted it to feel very Gollum-esque, very
Yes.
animalistic. Like you know it's a person because you can see that it's a person. Like and their anatomy fits that of a human, but the way they move is not like there's a person's brain up there. Like there's not a person's way of thinking. So I had him do a couple different variations where he kind of hunched his shoulders up, or he spread out his limbs very long and gangly looking to make it like just feel wrong. Like you're like a person would never move like that. And then obviously the way that we lit it and had the focus on JD's face was helpful to kind of obscure it. Cause I don't want I want you to literally be like, was that a person? Wait, was that an arm I saw there? So is that a person? Is that obviously the guy that he just saw? You know what I mean? I wanted that ambiguity of like, as soon as you show too much, you give it away and you can't go up from there. So I had to really like tame it down and give hopefully just enough that it was creepy without giving away the trick there.
Yeah, no, that very cool. And like I said, I was very curious, just like how, because the way you described it, right? You described it as animalistic, and like the whole time I was watching, I was like, I don't really know if that's a human that would be able to do that. Like, I actually had to think, like, okay, cool. Like, how do they create that? Was that maybe a very different way of it happening? So, but thank you. That kind of helps. You know, props to the future Gollum, right? Because he did a very good job of making sure
that's
that
Reed. That's all Reed Vroman, my AD.
Good job, Reed. I'm proud of you, man. You got something.
Good creepy guy. Good creepy guy energy.
You know, we kind of have that a little bit of a scare there. The flashlight starts working, and then we have our trap back, right? Well, we see the trap there, and this time, I think that the trap there, we got something in there, right? And I looked at it as human flesh, right? That's how I interpreted it. I looked at it as human flesh, because what we see Adam, right? And Luca, I like we're going to call Crawlspace Adam and Adam, right? So just to differentiate, because we've got a whole lot of Adams here, right? So we have Adam, he's sticking his hand into the trap. And I thought this was really interesting, right? Because to me, this is Crawlspace Adam setting up the trap for him now. Right, so before he was trying to trap Crawlspace Adam, now the tables have turned, so to speak. And you know, obviously that's more of a literal interpretation. But what's really happening for me, right, is Adam losing the fight to his addiction. This is him wanting to, you know, get to that next release that he's going to get. And you know, you see him putting his hand in very slowly, and then we see Crawlspace Adam is also sliding his hand in from the other direction. So Brady, I guess for you, it's a good thing that you had possums. I know that sounds really bad, but I think without having a trap like that, I don't know if you could have created the same type of, I think, way of handling it. Because I like how you kind of see the hands going in at the same time.
Yeah.
And we kind of see their hands meet. And I feel like we have, there's a little bit of, I would say, self-pleasure going on there, or at least that's how I looked at it. Like him kind of getting his other hand in there. It definitely felt very, I would say, sexually charged, which is interesting. Think about Adam, like having a connection with himself like that. But I think
he's
that
literally touching himself, Lee.
What?
It's that bald, dude. He's literally touching himself.
Yeah, that's true.
I was like,
right?
let's not even be subtle about it, right?
Yeah. So you can go ahead and look at it the exact same way.
If you want to look at it that way, yeah.
Yep. So, but this is where, I think Adam kind of comes to his senses, right? And we see a look at Crawlspace, and like I said, this is where I think maybe we might deviate on how we interpret things, but this is how I'm going to interpret the ending. Luca, I will absolutely throw it to you, just to kind of get your interpretations. But the way I look at it is, this is Adam kind of coming face to face with his demon, so to speak, right? Where Crawlspace Adam is his personal demon of him struggling with his addiction, and him coming to terms with this is not the person he wants to be, right? This is his kind of come to God moment, where he's looking at himself and being like, you know what, this is the rock bottom I don't want to hit. Because I think if, whatever addiction people struggle with, whether it's, alcohol, porn addiction, we always talk about rock bottom, right? Like how far do you have to fall before it's like, okay, this is where I have to make my life change. I think for Adam, this was his moment, right? So this is where he kind of comes to terms with that. And we kind of get this transition where, he takes a shower, he's clean shaven again. And we kind of have the ending, which I'll get to. But Luca, I wanted to see how you kind of interpreted this scene where you have Adam and Crawlspace Adam kind of getting together in the trap.
I mean, it's sort of that realization that this is me and he is me kind of thing, where he kind of has to reconcile the fact that this is who I am, and he comes to this existential crisis where he has to ask himself, is this a person that I wish to continue to be, or do I wish to reform myself? To go back to the example of the Divine Comedy by Dante, I mean, he literally has to hit rock bottom in this case. I mean, you don't go any further than a crawl space. He has to confront the very sin that he's struggling with and see its full effect before he makes that decision. So just like in the Divine Comedy, where where Dante goes into the very bowels of hell to see what the effects of sin are before he can climb the mount of purgatory and sort of cleanse himself and return to to the place that he was supposed to be. Adam has that same moment where he discovers, I don't want to be this person anymore. I see its full effects. And so by taking the shower, in a way, he's sort of undergoing another form of baptism too. By washing away, cleansing himself of the old sin, he's able to put on, because you'll notice that he dresses himself up. He's not in his underpants like he was for most of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He dresses himself up, and he is able to meet with Julia, or for using the Divine Comedy example, Beatrice, to where she's able to guide him into the new life, la vita nuova, as Dante would say. But what I also find so remarkable, and Brady, maybe this is something that you intended to do or not, but it sort of reminds me of the Gerasene demoniac from the Gospel of Mark, where when Jesus encounters him, he's living in the tombs. He is, I think he's either naked or half naked. Jesus exorcises him of the demons, and then when his family comes to retrieve the man, they find him fully clothed and in his right mind, as it says in the Gospel. So in a way, this is sort of a form of exorcism that Adam has to go through in order to return to the land of the living, as it were, because the house itself is very quiet. It's very, it's almost like a sepulcher, really. It's like a tomb in which he's encased himself in. And by descending into the crawl space, he's literally entered the bowels of death. All that's cold and dark and dirty. And by confronting, that demon within, and realizing what his path ought to be, he makes a decision to never return. Maybe he does go back into the crawl space. I don't know. Maybe he does it just for kicks. But by confronting, the evil within and making peace with it and overcoming it, he's able to cleanse himself and just like with the Gersing demoniac, clothe himself, as the new man, and reunite with his family. And maybe he goes back to church, reconciles with Dan, reconciles with everybody's alienated, and he becomes the person that that God intended him to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's funny. I think I have a very
Brady's thinking I did not plan any of this at all.
none of that, man. What are you talking about? No, well, that's the thing. Like, there are elements, and I just want to be clear. Like, I'm going to talk about this in a way that might be weird to some people. I'm going to say what I think certain things are. And and some people might be thinking like, well, you made it. What do you mean? You know what things are. But that's not actually how it works a lot of the time. And I think that's a good thing. Like, there are elements to how I think about that ending that are completely, like, I have a very dark view of that ending. I actually think, like, in my head, and some parts of that feel like he was unsuccessful, and now it's this almost like, what's he gonna say? Is he gonna just lie more? Was he actually, the only thing that happened was he gave in to it? And now, if we could extend that last shot a little bit more, maybe we'd be like, yeah, no, everything's fine. Yeah, totally. Like, he would just keep lying, and it's just the cycle continues. Like, I have kind of that perspective, but I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that's what it is, just because I made it. Like, it could be, that's the whole point of making it like that, is I want it to be able to be, maybe he did face that thing in this quasi exorcism kind of situation and come out the victor, right? Maybe he did actually deal with it and finally confront it, and was able to clean himself up and present himself to this girl and maybe reconcile. Like, that is just as valid as what I'm saying. So I wasn't like thinking, oh, it has to be one of these. I just kind of have my own fun opinion about what I think it is. And I think, like, I like making stuff where even the artist himself can kind of just be like, maybe, like, dude, I think Luca is right on too with that interpretation. I think that's so interesting. And I think that's kind of the trick, is like, build in enough little things that you could hear my interpretation or someone else's interpretation and Luca's and Lee's, and you could kind of see how they could all be right. Like, I want that to be the feeling, but I feel like I always bias towards like the most depressing, the darkest way of interpreting a story.
Well,
So,
that is super interesting. So, and I'm gonna help. To me, I'm gonna wrap up with my final thoughts with it, right? Because I think, to me, right, I ask people to pin those moments with Julie in their head, right? Because I'm gonna walk away with this from, I would say, a little bit of a different aspect, right? So, to me, the way I looked at it, and I think, and this is how I interpret it, and obviously I'm right, you're wrong, Brady. But so
yes,
he's the movie pope after all. So
I submit.
But to me, what I thought was very interesting, and this is how I looked at it, because initially I was going to ask you off the bat, why open your story with kind of this nonverbal way of handling stuff, right? So we don't hear the argument, we just kind of see what happened. And to me, I have a reason for that, right? I felt like the reason that we didn't hear Julie at the beginning, we don't hear any of their interaction, and why when we call Julia, we just get the answering, we just get the voicemail, we don't get to speak with her, is because I feel like he's so into his addiction that he hasn't accepted he has a problem yet, right? I think for him, it doesn't really matter what's going on around him. His mind is, he's, a sex addict, porn addict. He's struggling with that addiction, and that's all he can think about, right? That's all that's consuming him. So everything else that's out there he's totally blocking it off.
He refuses
why
to
I
accept the
think-
consequences of his actions, basically.
Yes, thank you, Luca. Yeah. So what I feel like really works, or the way I interpret the ending, the fact that you hear Julia just flat out saying like, "Hey, are you okay?" I looked at this as him accepting that he has a problem and looking to find a solution. That's the way that I really interpreted it. So I feel like for me, this was his opportunity to really chat with her. So in my head canon, right, he's really straightforward with Julia about what's happening because now he's listening to her. Now he really hears her side of what everything's going to be happening. So they have an opportunity to kind of mend the bridge as much as you can. Now, obviously, you know, a lot of that is going to be open to, you know, I'm not going to say they're going to have a nice, happy relationship for the rest of their lives, but I think at least for Adam in that moment, this was his rock bottom, and this was his light, right? This is the light in his darkness that he's going to help bring him out of what he's going through. Now, whether or not he'll remain in that light is very much to be seen, but I feel like the way I look at it is there's enough in there that this is going to be what he's going to be doing as he moves forward.
I love that. Yeah, I love that, man. And I think a lot of that was born out of the feeling like him leaving that message just felt right, I guess. It felt like it was too early for them to have any kind of real conversation. It also didn't feel like she would answer the phone. Like it felt like if you've established such a fracture in their relationship, and we don't even know the entire nature of that, right? We just get a kind of a glimpse into it. It didn't feel right for her to like answer the phone. It goes to voicemail after like 2 rings. So you can assume that she actually sent him to voicemail. And that just felt more right for him to have to communicate one way and not get anything back and have to just now kind of explain himself a little bit and try to give her some kind of you know, you could look at it as an apology, as a goodbye, as a, you know, as just trying to make some kind of I don't even know, not a confession, but like um I don't know, amends almost. Yeah, maybe that's the right word. And it just felt more powerful for him to have to do that to a cold, lifeless voice machine.
Yes.
You know, like it felt right for him in that moment to have to do that because that's the position that he's put himself in. That's where the relationship is at. I don't think she would have answered the phone anyway. So it just felt more real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it would have cheapened the journey if he had an opportunity to talk with her before. Because I think a lot of it is he has to come to terms with his problem, right? And I think, and I'll use my grandfather's example, right? My grandfather lived into his 90s. Absolutely such a cool guy, but he struggled with alcohol addiction for a lot of his life. He'll even tell you it ruined his relationship with my grandmother, and they broke up over his alcoholism. He hit rock bottom, right? And I think he was probably in his 40s, I want to say. And like I said, after that moment, right, that rock bottom for him, he made a choice that he needed to do something else, right? And my grandfather was always huge into like Alcoholics Anonymous. Like that was to him what dug him out of the ashes, right, of his life. And that's why for me, that's how I kind of looked at it, because for I think, you know, my grandmother, you know, his kids, I think a lot of them always knew that there was an issue there, but it was hard to get through to him because he couldn't accept what he was doing was bad, right?
Yeah.
He'd talk about like drinking on the job and doing all this other stuff. And it's really dark to think about everything he'd gone through. But he eventually, you know, figured out like, hey, I cannot live my life like this.
Yeah.
And eventually he, you know, was clean and sober all the way up until when he passed away, right? So 40 plus years, he was sober.
That's awesome.
And then drink again. So that's why and I think this is kind of where, like I said, my life experiences maybe shapes how I view this a little bit differently than maybe other people, right? Because I look at this like, the first thing is like you just have to be able to accept what's going on, right? Like you cannot fix yourself if you don't feel like there's a problem. So that's what I kind of looked at with this story. So I think just from my own life experiences, I could just imagine, you know, like my grandfather with a different type of addiction being kind of the main character in this and kind of going through a very similar journey. So
Yeah,
um,
that's awesome, man. 40, that's so cool that he turned around like that and turned the corner. I think, yeah, I think it's funny too because I think a lot of addiction is like it's not bad until I'm not functional, but there's so many addicts who are perfectly functional. Like
yeah,
you can be complete like good. You can be good at your job and be a total whether it's alcohol or whatever drugs or anything. Like I think people are really good at finding ways to fit their uh thing they know they shouldn't do into their regular life so that they don't have to change it. Like so it's weird. It's like we only ever think of TLC episodes when someone is like drinking Listerine because they need some alcohol and it's just so bad they can't even, you know, get up in the morning, and that does exist too, but there's a lot of people who are definitely fit the category of addict having an addiction, and yet no, they still go to work, they're still honoring a lot of their agreements, but it doesn't mean you're not addicted to something.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
very well said. So so Luca, I'll pass it over to you just for your final thoughts, and I guess if you want to add anything on Adam and Julia's future relationship there.
Well, I will paraphrase Saint Paul here. We must work out our salvation with fear and trembling. What we see Adam, go through, and what happens at the end. It's not, it's not simply that he's overcome it and that's it. He never has to deal with it again. It's something that he's going to have to struggle with, but he sort of put himself in a position where he can finally surround himself with the people who can help him get through this addiction. It's part of the human condition, really. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely it's not easy. And I hope that ending made it feel like I'm it's really cool that I'm glad, like I guess maybe there's a little more hope than I had put in there cuz like you're both kind of coming away with that, and I like that. And I'm always just so depressing with my interpretations of things, but yeah, and I know JD, like the lead actor, he worked very hard and suffered a lot for this role. So huge props to him. He did a great job. He had to act under that crawl space until like 5 in the morning.
Mm,
It was not easy because we shot the thing in 2 days, so it was go go go. And he was great. And Sierra, who plays Julia, was like she has such minimal screen time, but I think she's so talented. Like I think
yes,
she's so good at conveying. I mean, she does this look. I know I'm just going on about it, but like it's not me. That's all Sierra and JD, like their talent. Like she does this look at the beginning in that scene that I really love where she's looking at him and it's her over the shoulder shot. And you can just see her, she's looking at him and then she like does this thing where you can like see her either make a decision in her mind in that one little look, or you can see her maybe feel pity for him. You don't really know. You just know in her mind this incredibly powerful thing happened. And I love that she can do that with just a look, with no words. Like that's what being a good actor is all about. And oh man, I got to work with some great people for this. The whole crew stayed up, like I said, until 5 in the morning under that house, squatting down. It was not comfortable, but they all did it, and they're amazing. I appreciate every single one of those guys. They were all just awesome. Couldn't have done it without them.
yeah, and I just want to echo that I was like totally blown away by a lot of it. Obviously, JD played Adam, right?
Yes.
So I mean, just totally incredible that he was able to do so much, right? And I like the fact that what you said, right? A lot of it is the visual storytelling, and I feel like that's what really helps get this message conveyed, and just be able to kind of do as much as he did. Um, I thought was really good, and I absolutely loved the who played Julia. Like once again, was really strong, and like I said, I think just so poignant that really she had 3 words the whole time, right? Are you okay? Right?
Hmm.
That's all she said. And it had so much impact and so much meaning by saying so little. But to your point, right? So much of the other heavy lifting for the acting performance was from a lot of her just emotions, just seeing like that face.
oh,
And I'm sorry, Luca. Oh, were you sneezing, Luca? I think he was sneezing.
I
So
think he got
uh,
murdered.
Well, it's okay. I'll make sure he's alive. I'll call him in like 10 minutes if we don't hear back from him. So, um, but I
Yeah,
think it was just so, like I said, just so impressive how you could just convey so much. I know exactly the scene you're talking about because I remember just the look on the face, and it's like I almost interpreted like she's just like, I don't know if I used the term pity. I felt like she was almost disgusted by like
yeah,
how like messed up the situation was. Like she can't believe that this is the person that she married, right? This was
it's
a
beautiful
married
acting.
couple,
It's
right?
just
Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful acting.
yeah.
I mean, she's
And I
so
could,
good.
yeah, and I could feel that, right? I could sense that, like, oh my god, like you are not the person that I thought you were. And I like how she could just visually convey that. At least to me, she was able to visually convey that,
Yeah,
like that. So,
yeah,
yeah,
she's
that's
powerful, man.
yeah.
And that's
So
why I cast her. I've worked with her before. She's very powerful in being able to just understand the feeling of a moment and let that play on her face. And I mean, you see that in the flashbacks where there's just like quick flashes of maybe their life before, and you have to show her in a way that like gives this feeling of nostalgia and of familiarity, and she's so good at doing that. Like I just yeah, and JD was great too at just inhabiting this um what's the word I want to use? Just this isolated person with a fractured life, and they both like I got so blessed with the people that I ended up being able to work with. So it's just such a blessing that everyone who worked on it and did such a good job and gave it their all. Like, and also another credit to Sierra, it's such a small role. It's like the kind of thing that you could easily just phone in and say whatever, it doesn't really matter. And she was there the whole day. She never gave me the feeling that she was just like, okay, this doesn't matter, right? This isn't important. She I think she realized that even though it was a small role, it was actually a critical role. Like just because something's small and doesn't have a lot of screen time doesn't mean it's not extremely
absolutely.
important because you have to feel the love there or it doesn't work. Like nothing matters if you don't understand that something has been lost, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
um, on maybe like a lighter subject that I was just kind of thinking about this as a goofy thing, but how long did it take between like because obviously Adam has to have some time to grow up that facial hair, right?
Yeah.
So I guess how long like you must have like started at one time and then must have had to wait for some time before
Yeah.
you could kind of get to some more of that stuff. So how did you kind of decide to split the filming between I guess facial hair Adam and non-facial hair Adam?
Yeah.
uh,
We just
and how that kind of worked out.
yeah. We shot everything with his facial hair first. So
Okay.
I had him grow the beard and then he came down for the 2 days and we shot everything where he has a beard, every single thing. And once we got that, then there was some time just because of scheduling, I think maybe like a week or something, I can't remember, in between, maybe more. And then he just obviously he just shaved and then he came back and we had to Frankenstein shoot the reverse shots and obviously him eating the stuff, him by the cage, the ending, and the beginning where he doesn't have a beard. We just shot that all in a day. So we kind of had to do that Frankenstein thing where it's like here's the reverse shot, here's him at the cage, and then you turn the other shot and now it's still him. And we had to know where to put the camera so that when you cut it would feel like these two characters that we shot weeks and weeks apart are right next to each other in the same moment. And we also used Reed again, uh, Reed to do that shot where it's kind of an over the shoulder when they're by the cage and you first see
Mhm.
the creature and then it starts like getting up in the foreground of the camera and then you can see Adam just kind of watching him as he rises up. That's obviously can't be him. So that's Reed trying his best to look animalistic, and that's one of my favorite shots too.
Interesting. So this actually kind of brought up something interesting that it made
Yeah,
me kind of
please.
think about, right? So you have obviously he's playing one character, right? And you're filming things out of sync, right? So you're not like following the cohesive side of the story. You're obviously filming things because this is what scheduling works like. So
Right. Yeah.
that's kind of how things are going to have to work, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever encountered an issue where maybe as you're filming something, maybe you feel like the character needs to take a different approach. And it's like, you can't really go back to facial hair, Adam, because you've already kind of shown everything you can. I mean, I guess he could regrow back his facial hair, but that'd be a little bit tedious. So has there ever been like any concerns, or like, I guess a situation where like maybe the character developed differently on screen than maybe you had envisioned, and then maybe that kind of messed up and you're like, okay, how do I fix this character that maybe is going a different way than maybe I was thinking he would go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I can't think of a situation, and maybe JD can think of one, and I'm sorry, JD, if I'm forgetting. But I can't think of a situation where we like decided to take a different direction kind of entirely. I know he was always giving me new little idiosyncrasies with each take, so he would do different things. But that's kind of just because we had so many conversations beforehand. Like me and him, I always like to have different Zoom calls if they live far away. I had him come to the house one time, and we just talked about the characters so that on the day when we finally, because you don't have any time, making a movie is going to war, so you don't have any time. You can't be sitting there trying to figure all this stuff out. Maybe if we had, big budgets, we could be sitting there doing stuff, but we didn't have that time. So I wanted us to really understand who the character was before we started shooting, so that on the day we didn't have to waste time getting there. It would just be a matter of kind of directing him and getting the little touches here and there. But yeah, dude, it was scary shooting him with the facial hair, knowing he was going to shave. And he does other roles. He's a working actor. So I can't just ask him to randomly grow his facial hair because he might need to be shaved for other roles. So it was very scary because if we missed something, it was going to be maybe months and months before we could get it. And to let him grow his facial hair out, that's assuming he doesn't have any roles that need him to shave. So it was really, we had to make sure we were prepared, and I knew every single shot I needed to get so that I didn't get into the editing room and go, oh crap, I didn't get and I still wish I had gotten other shots, but we got everything we needed to convey it. But it's definitely scary when your actor's about to change their physical appearance completely for months and months, and you might never be able to get them back in with that facial hair again, let alone matching it so that it looks the same. So we just tried to just soldier through and bust it all out in the 2 days. And again, props to JD for being willing to do that.
Awesome. No, and like I said, I think a lot of that comes from you just having good preparation, right? Because I think maybe a lesser director, right, I'll say, might not be thinking about all those aspects of it. And then, like you pointed out, it's really hard to you can't jump in a time machine and go back. You have to kind of deal with what you have. So then maybe you're...
sorry to interrupt you. There are great directors who don't do any of that. There are great directors that like that spontaneity. There's like some kind of creative juice that happens when you haven't thought everything out because you're kind of finding it. And that's awesome. It's not the way that I've worked, but you got to find that middle ground because I can't squash it and over prepare. So you have to like leave just enough breathing room that the actor can bring something that you weren't expecting, and it could be really, really good. And and you have to know I spend a lot of my day saying no to ideas, but you still have to be willing to say yes to like if JD brings me something and he's like, what if I did this, or what if I looked over here at that moment, or I have to be open to that because he could bring me something really great. And if I don't, and he did a lot of great. I mean, geez, when he plays that creature in that close up with him by the cage when it's first revealed, he's so good there. Like the way he let the food like fall out of his mouth, and the way that he kind of goes from this like weird state, it looks like he's just been born. I love it. Like he's like just coming out of it, and then his eyes kind of roll down and then focus. You can see them like focus on Adam, and that's when we cut to him. And that's all JD, like just doing great JD stuff. Like that's just being a good actor. So again, I'm just lucky that I'm working with these guys and able to take credit for all their good ideas, basically.
Awesome. So Luca, first of all, you okay over there, Luca? Just want to double check.
Yeah, I'm fine. I had to just blow my nose.
No worries. No worries. Right. We were going anywhere from you were sick to you're murdered, so I'm glad it was more on the one side and not as much on the other. So but yeah, I guess I just wanted to, open up to you if you had anything kind of final that you want to discuss with the film. And I think, Brady, if you're able to share anything about any future stuff, we would love to hear that. But Luke, I'll certainly give you the opportunity here to just throw out anything you want for Brady.
I can't think of anything at this point.
Yeah. It's
all right. So I guess Brady. So as much as you're allowed to share, right? Because I know that not everyone wants to kind of disclose everything about what's happening, but it sounds like maybe you have some future projects. Anything you'd be cool with sharing with me and Luca here?
I'm always working on something. So I've got a few projects in the works right now. I've got a feature film that should be coming out soon, that I did with some Charlotte people. That's been in post production for a while. Probably said that last time we did an interview too. But yeah, I would say because I'm doing so many different things, like I'm going to West Virginia to shoot some stuff with this great company, and I'm doing my own short films and hopefully feature stuff with scripts. So honestly, I would just say the best way to see any of my stuff is just to subscribe to the YouTube. Like that's I'm not trying to plug a subscribe. I'm just saying that's really the most consistent place. It's just the most consistent place where I'm gonna upload, narrative short film stuff. And then if I drop a feature, then I will, like a feature film that has distribution on something, then I'll announce that probably through my YouTube just the same. So that's the place to go for just seeing anything that me and my team are doing.
Awesome. I think that's everything, Luca. Did you have any anything else that we wanted to chat about here?
Yeah, come on, guys. Let's keep talking about porn. Come on, let's do it.
I'm all porned out, but I was gonna say, I mean, any movies that are coming up, I mean, definitely let us know because we'd love to chat with you some more about.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I love talking to you guys. I think you guys have a really interesting, like you always bring a perspective that I haven't heard before. But when I hear it, I go, that's awesome. That's like either that's exactly what I wanted, or like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that before. And so it's really, I appreciate that about you guys. You think deeply about the things you watch, and you give I don't know, it feels good to have someone watch your thing and think deeply about it. So I just want to say I appreciate you guys so much for doing that and for being active watchers and people who care about this type of thing. It means a lot.
Yeah, no, and I will say, at least for myself, I'm sure Luke will echo this, is that it's been a ton of fun, right? I would say that I haven't really watched like a lot of like kind of like shorter films like this, so I think this is very new ground for me. But like really, it's opened up my eyes to like something that to me is so much better than a lot of things that we see nowadays. Like me and Luca just saw The Gladiator 2, and we'll be having a view of that in a little bit. But it's kind of like comedic that we saw like a lot of copy and paste, right? Like the movie is just like kind of just.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
I like Ridley. Yeah. I was gonna say I like Ridley Scott.
Yeah. Oh no, I love Ridley Scott too, right? And we're not going to spoil anything.
Man, but yeah.
But I will say that, and I believe Luca will say the same thing. There was a lot of copy and paste from the original one. So it's really fun to be able to like watch something, and I think the way that you're able to kind of show the audience what you want to show is really impressive. Not to sound like a broken record, but I struggle so much nowadays with everything has to be force fed to you what you're trying to tell. Like it's just like you have to like literally get bashed over the head with a hammer, and then they're just gonna sit there and stuff the meaning down your throat without like giving the audience like, we're an adult audience where we could think, right? So yeah, I get that, maybe in younger audience, in those types of things, yeah, I get that, right? It's okay to be a little bit heavy-handed, but I feel like there's a lot of obviously adult viewers out there, and we're capable of thinking, right? We're able to look at deeper meanings, and like just from the discussion with you, right? You like to have that ambiguity with a lot of the stuff, and it's impressive. Like I've definitely heard a lot of different directors that are like, well, it's just kind of how you mean it, right? I like to use Inception as a great example, right? Like you have this, you have his totem like just sitting there spinning. You got people that are like, hey, it just continues to spin, or like, hey, it started to wobble, so it's gonna fall over.
Right. And now why is that it's such a good ending now because
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it. By the way, it's one of Christopher Nolan. I think one of his greatest strengths is doing things like that and
Mhm.
having endings that are kind of that stay with you in that way. Like that image is going to divide people on what they think about it, and that division and that ambiguity is what keeps the ending around. It's what makes us
Yes.
all literally feel that feeling of almost catharsis, and then it cuts to black and it's the greatest feeling. Like it's a great ending for that reason. You have to be willing to be like, hey, let them make it, let the audience decide what
Yep.
happens there. That can be
Yeah.
powerful sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's also helps with like those repeat viewings, right? Because I've seen Inception so many times, right? Absolutely love that movie,
Yeah,
and
it's
like I said,
great.
when I watched something like yours, right? Like I had to watch it again. Like once I watched it, I was like, I feel like I feel like I could really watch a movie and really watch it, right? Not just I'm looking at the screen and I'm seeing what's happening, right? I'm really trying to watch it to understand the meaning of it. And I think that's what gets people to go back and view these things more than once, right? There's a reason why I think we saw Inception probably like 3 times in theaters. I don't
Yeah.
know, Luca, if you did or not, but
Uh,
I saw it a lot, and it's a fantastic movie. But a lot of it's because we want to learn more about the story. And I remember
yeah.
as soon as I finished watching yours for the first time, Brady, I immediately watched it a second time
Oh,
because there was
that's
times
awesome.
where like I was looking at something and I'm like, you know what? This is I like I said, I'm not gonna pretend like I just know everything about you. But like I know that when you're giving me something, I know there's a meaning behind it, right? So the
Mhm.
cracked screens, the lack of dialogue at the beginning, like I think that you're doing it all with a purpose. And I think that's what kind of gravitates people to really
Yeah.
enjoying this type of stuff, is being able to be like, okay, I want to understand the deeper meaning of this, because obviously, and I remember just reading some of your comments, and there's clearly some people that I
I
think
love
have
the
very good,
comments.
like, yes, right. There's people that are like, what did I just watch? And there's other people that are like, oh, okay, this is what I think is happening. And it's interesting to see that, because I think everyone has different levels of media literacy. And like I said, some people, like I would kind of consider myself to be decent with it. Luca, I would imagine, is just way too good at it, and sometimes he knows way too much about what he's looking at.
Well,
So
I think that's great too. I don't know if I would call it like, yeah, as far as that goes, I love that there were people who, and again, you'll see this in some of the comments for that video, like they weren't sure what the what like they were supposed to feel because they hadn't even decided yet if porn itself was like a bad thing or if it was even being portrayed as like they were like, wait, but like there were comments that were like, well, porn's not bad though, so that can't be what the movie's saying. And there were comments that were like, yeah, it is. What are you talking about? And it was great to see that, like, if you don't even make that underlying assumption first, now you're totally going to end up at a different interpretive place than someone else. So like just that first scene, since nothing's being said, I think I had some people say that like they would have liked to have known, um, and I'm not saying they're wrong or anything. It's just kind of how they felt about it. That they would have liked to have known, like, okay, was there a specific thing? Like, did he, miss their anniversary because he was watching porn or something like that, or did he promise he wasn't going to do it and then he did it, and that's, or there were other people that were just like, no, it's enough that he was watching porn. I get why that would fracture their relationship. So that was just cool. Like, I love just seeing people decide on different levels how they just like, did they feel like it was bad or did they feel like it was just a guy who had a problem with it and that's what made it bad, or is the underlying thing, pornography, bad in of itself? And like, I have my opinions about that, but hopefully I didn't cook them too much, bake them too much into the story that people couldn't have those differing opinions on it, because I think that's interesting. I love the YouTube comment section for that. That's the best.
all right, then, Luca, you can go ahead and take us on home here.
Well, let's change things a bit. How about you take us out? Your moviness.
Yeah, sure. No, so like I said, Brady, I really appreciate it. Definitely would
Thank
appreciate
you.
people subscribing to your channel. Like I said, I was kind of going through and like looking at all the stuff that you posted, so it was really good to kind of see that.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was a ton of fun to watch, and I just appreciate feeling like a director trusts his audience to watch something and be able to come to their own conclusions.
I
And like I
appreciate
said,
that
just
so much.
what you talked about, it totally made me think about it. Like, yeah, you know what? You brought up a great point, right? Like, there are people that are going to look at it like that. And just because I came to my own conclusion doesn't mean I'm any more right or more wrong than anybody else as far as how that conversation goes. So, but yeah, like I said, I really appreciate it. Look forward to, future work, and certainly, anything you want us to review, you want to come back here, you always got a seat open for you there, Brady. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lee. No, you and Luca are awesome, man. I always love talking to you guys. So thank you so much for saying all that, and just for watching it again, and just, thinking deeply about it and talking with me. You guys are great. I love coming on.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brady.
Thank you.
I don't know how to sign off, Luca.